Hare Krishna. Today we are going to read chapter 16, Daivasura Sampat Vibhaha Yoga. Sampad means sampati, wealth of a devotee and of a demon. Asura, of course, means demon, right? Characteristics, you may say, wealth, characteristics, so on and so forth. Deva here means devotee, and Asura is to be taken to be a one who is not a devotee. Okay. First, our obeisance to Sri Sri Radha Govinda temple deities of ISKCON Mangaluru, and our pranams to Srila Prabhupada before we commence. Always Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatyadi Satarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. This is what we saw yesterday, chapter 15. Chapter 15 was Purushottama Yoga, correct? Purusha means the person, and Uttama is the supreme, right? So we saw about the inverted banyan tree and how that we have to cut it by detachment to reach Godhead. Correct. Then we saw about transmigration and who will understand the principles of transmigration. We saw the echoes of opulence again in this chapter, how Krishna maintains planets and even is the digestive fire in our bodies. We saw about the infallible and the fallible and the supreme person who is beyond all that. So we concluded yesterday on the note that we should not doubt, and our faith has to be strong. Correct. That is the summary of Vedanta Sutra. This is what we saw yesterday. Now, today's overview is this. We are going to see the transcendental and demonic qualities. Okay, how a transcendental person behaves and how a demonic person behaves. Then we are going to see the nature of demoniacs, how they actually behave in regular day-to-day life. And then we are going to see what is the result of their demonic activities and the choice of elevation or degradation, because Krishna always gives you free will, so you have to exercise it, right? So let's commence with the first verse. This is actually verses 1 to 3, 16, chapter 16, verses 1 to 3. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, fearlessness, purification of one's existence, cultivation of spiritual knowledge, charity, self-control, performance of sacrifice, study of the Vedas, austerity, simplicity, non-violence, truthfulness, freedom from anger, renunciation, tranquility, aversion to fault finding, compassion for all living entities, freedom from covetousness, gentleness, modesty, steady determination, vigor, forgiveness, fortitude, cleanliness, and freedom from envy and from the passion for honor. These transcendental qualities, O son of Bharata, belong to godly men endowed with divine nature. So as I mentioned, Sampad means Sampati, right? Which is the wealth of a devotee, characteristics, as I was saying. Right here, Deva means a devotee of Krishna, of Vishnu, Shiva, Krishna, a Vaishnava, basically. So one who isn't a devotee is considered to be an Asura. That is a person who is not inclined to serve the Lord. See, we generally say, right, he's a gentleman, but he is an atheist, right? But he can't be like that. You see, you cannot call him a gentleman. He's a nice person. He doesn't believe in God, it seems. That's not how you describe it. If you don't believe in God, then he cannot, by extension, be a nice person. If you don't believe in God, automatically you're an Asura. For example, we had Jarasandha, right? He was a powerful king of Magadha, contemporary of Krishna and Arjuna, right? Very charitable person, but he was a Asura nonetheless. And we all know how that ended, right? This is why I had previously mentioned that the idiom we had, that Manav Seva is Madhav Seva. That is quite a misnomer, actually. Your Seva is only to the body. When it is in connection with Madhav Seva, is Manav Seva. Manav Seva is Madhav Seva. The Seva there is connected to the Manav, right? Manav is the body. Your Seva is connected to the body. You remember that example I gave you? It's like rescuing a drowning man and returning with his clothes. What use is that, right? So why is this so? Because why is it that Seva to Manavs or the body is generally not considered to be Madhav Seva? You see, the service to God gives spiritual pleasure. Like you seek that pleasure. When a person denies God, he is not able to perceive that spiritual pleasure. There is no incentive at all to him for him to being good. Anything as a human does, anything a human does is always actuated by some sort of an impetus to act. There is some reason behind everything that we do, right? We don't do anything without any reason. So when you start to deny God, you take away that spiritual aspect of it entirely, right? So for some time he may appear to be good, but any moment we have to realize that he can act demonically, right? There is no incentive to be good, and all these good characteristics of that person is without foundation, and therefore they can crumble at any time, right? So we should be careful when you are dealing with persons who deny God themselves. These characteristics here, they are really profound, and each characteristic you can spend a day upon actually, but then we don't have that amount of time, so we'll deal with the initial ones, and then quickly run through the others, right? First is the fearlessness, and it is a matter of import that it is listed as the first characteristic of a person, of a godly man endowed with divine nature. That's how the verse ends. So all these characteristics belong to godly men endowed with divine nature, right? What is the first one? The first one is fearlessness, the first quality of a gentleman. If a man has fear, he can have no characteristic at all, correct? A drowning man will drown anyone who is near him because of his tendency to grab anything. Why? Because of fear. I'll give you two examples forthright. One is Kamsa. Kamsa became very fearful when he heard the Asariri of his impending demise at the hand of the eighth son of Devaki, right? And he became a demon trying to stop the fructifying of the Asariri, right? The opposite of that is Parikshit Maharaj. Parikshit Maharaj was cursed to die in 7 days, but he was not fearful. He surrendered to God and wanted to know how to reach him. And what followed was the Srimad Bhagavatam, right? So if you have faith in the Lord, you are fearless. Remember what I mentioned about Prahalad going up to Narasimha after Hiranyakasipu was vanquished? The Lord was angry. He was roaring, right? The devatas and demigods were terrified of the form that the Lord had taken, and they had to pacify him, right? So they sent this young boy Prahalad to go and pacify him. Now Prahalad is a young boy, but he knew no fear. Why? Because he had surrendered to God, right? So he walks up right royally to Narasimha, small boy. What would he have known? But entirely fearless because of his surrender to God, right? How is this world? Padam padam vipadam, right? A danger in every step. And yet that small child, he goes and sings beautiful prayers to Narasimha, which is dealt with in Srimad Bhagavatam, correct? And no fear, no fear. Why? Because he had surrendered to God, right? It's like a small child. A small child takes the finger of his or her father, and at that moment he is totally fearless. Nothing in the world can stop him, right? Because his father is beside him. For us also it's the same, except that in the place of our father it is Krishna himself, correct? Hold his hand and we will be entirely fearless. And then the next one is purification of one's existence, right? So what is life's purpose? Life's purpose is to be purified, is that we should be purified. We have to realize why we have been born. What is the goal? The goal is to go back to Godhead. So many times I've mentioned it here, right? So how do you go back? We have to be pure. Strictly follow rules and regulations, follow the principles in this book, Bhagavad Gita, and you will find your way back. And this is the easiest way back to the hospital, to the Lord, right? Just chant, and it will purify you, and it will also get rid of your karmas. It will just burn the karmas that had been accumulated so far. And by karmas, I mean the bad ones, all right, not the good ones. The good ones always subsist. What did Krishna say in the previous chapters? We saw he preserves what you have and he gives you what you don't have, correct? We saw that in the previous chapter, somewhere around the 8th chapter we saw that, right? Then what's the next one? The next one is cultivation of spiritual knowledge. Read. Just three things you have to do: read, and read more. Okay. But read what? Not fiction. You have to read spiritual texts, Vedas, Shastras, Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita. So many things to read in order to cultivate our spiritual knowledge. The only thing is we have to read. Reading, of course, it goes without saying, is a good habit to cultivate. Whatever you read is going to help you, but it is always better to read spiritual books in order to develop your spiritual knowledge, because that is a characteristics of a godly man endowed with divine nature, correct? So therefore it is that we have to read, we have to understand Krishna, and you can understand Krishna only if you read more about him. And then the next one is charity. Okay, so the first three qualities: fearlessness, purification of one's existence, cultivation of spiritual knowledge. These predominantly are focused towards a sannyasi. Okay, so we go on now next to a grahastha. Okay, you see, in Vedic times, sannyasis didn't have anything with them. Sannyasi means, by mere definition, it means to renounce, right? Therefore he did not have anything with him. So where from would he give charity? So charity is not a characteristic which will apply to him. Nowadays sannyasis are running the entire state, but that's an entirely different thing, so let's not go there, right? Self-control is the next one. So charity, as I was mentioning, charity is for grahasthas. Okay, Vedic times, in fact, there used to be a mode of behavior that you are supposed to follow, that before you eat, you have to go out onto the street and call out thrice, if anyone is hungry, please join us for lunch or dinner or breakfast. You're supposed to do that, and only then come back and eat. So you have to offer food for others before you start eating with your family, right? The next one is self-control, correct? Charity, yes, self-control. Self-control, again, for the grahastha, he is the earning person in the society. You see, initially brahmachari is not earning, grahastha is the only one who's earning. Subsequently, the other two ashramas also, they relinquish, and so it is only the grahastha who can provide charity, right? And he is the earning person in this society. Now he has to maintain a home, he has a spouse, he has children. And what happens if he doesn't have any self-control? The mere fact that he has money will lead him to all paths of destruction, right? So self-control is a very important aspect for him. And performance of sacrifice, again, the grahastha. At that stage of being grahastha, it may not be easy for him to cultivate spiritual knowledge, because he has to earn money to support his family. He has children to look after. He has a spouse to look after, as I was mentioning. So replacing knowledge of spiritual knowledge, spiritual cultivation of spiritual knowledge, is sacrifices here, purification, performance of sacrifices. So this is the recommendation instead. And then we go on to the next one, which is the study of the Vedas. Here the focus now shifts to the brahmachari. Okay, study of the Vedas, austerity, simplicity, all these are focused towards a brahmachari. It is needless to say that brahmachari has to be austere and simple, right? He should study the Vedas under the guidance of an authorized guru. He should serve his guru. Like that, there are, how many of them here? There are 26 qualities, I think. Yes, 26 qualities that are essential. Okay, now let's just see the remaining very quickly. Non-violence, ahimsa paramo dharma, a universal principle. So many great people have spoken about it. There are, Buddhism is based on non-violence. Truthfulness, again, a universal principle. Freedom from anger, again, a universal principle. Renunciation, Bhagavad Gita is full of it, but Bhagavad Gita says you have to renounce, and renounce finally, right? And self-control is, again, as I mentioned, the same current that runs throughout the Bhagavad Gita. Then we have tranquility. The ability to maintain peace is what is tranquility, right? Then aversion to fault finding. When you really boil it down, there are only two persons who you can really find fault with as a matter of right. One is your disciple, and the second is your children. And both would be in their interest. So they have to realize that you're not finding fault with them, in fact, but you are trying to put them up on the right path. So you have to convey that I'm not finding fault with you, I'm just trying to get you on the right path. But generally, these are the only two classes with which you can even advise. And the rest, of course, you can advise only if they ask you to, right? Then what follows? Compassion. Compassion is again a universal principle. Rest are all universal principles. Forgiveness, fortitude, cleanliness, all these are universal principles. There is no classification for that it must apply to only these people or not, right? So these are the characteristics, 26 of them, which belong to godly men endowed with divine nature. Okay, so this is dealt with in verses 1 to 3. 16.4.
दम्पो दर्पो भीमा sorry दम्भो दर्पोऽभिमानश्च क्रोधपारुषमेव च अज्ञानं चाभिजातस्य पार्थ सम्पदम् आसुरीम्. Arrogance, pride, anger, conceit, harshness, and ignorance. These qualities belong to those of demonic nature, O son of Pratha.
So for being a demonic person, you just need to have 6 qualities. Easy qualities to have: arrogance, pride, anger, conceit, harshness, and ignorance. So easy it comes, right? But this is only an introduction, right? We'll see more of the qualities of the demonic people. It's like an elephant here. You just go in and just push everybody out. That's arrogance and pride, anger, harshness, and ignorance. And the first portion, that's the first 3 verses which you just dealt with, these 26 characteristics, they are belonging to the divine people with divine nature, as I mentioned. The rest of the chapter now is going to deal with the characteristics of demons. Now this is only an introduction, right? So let's see the next verse, 16.5.
दैवी सम्पद् विमोक्षाय निबन्धाय सुरीमता मासु च सम्पदं दैवीम् अभिजातोऽसि पाण्डव. The transcendental qualities are conducive to liberation, whereas the demonic qualities make for bondage. Do not worry, O son of Pandu, for you are born with the divine qualities.
Krishna is giving a certificate here to Arjuna. No one can judge them, actually, right? The Supreme Personality of Godhead has given his certificate to Arjuna. He says, you are already born with divine qualities. You don't have to worry. But then, generally when you speak about Bhagavad Gita or Mahabharata for that matter, people come out with their own interpretations. You see, they say, oh, he could have done that. Oh, he could have done this. Who are we to judge? See, so many times in the course of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna himself has stated that Arjuna is a dear friend. Now, can anyone be on that terms with Krishna if they're not perfect? Simply, you will hear people cast aspersions without knowing or thinking about it against Krishna, against Arjuna. But then they do it in regular life against us. So I guess they're just being consistent in casting aspersions, right? See, that's why Krishna, by listing the divine qualities, mentioned freedom from passion for honor. Divine judgment is the highest, right? We all agree with that. When God decides something, there is no appeal against that, correct? So when Krishna is saying here that Arjuna has been born with divine qualities, then we cannot question Arjuna as to what his motives are. It is not proper, right? When God himself says that in his judgment that he is born with divine qualities, the matter ends there. It's not a matter which is open to argument any further. But then what happens is we try to substitute our puny logic and then find fault with Krishna and Arjuna. Atrocious, isn't it? But anyway, so what does Krishna say in the first part? This was the second part which we just dealt with. The first part Krishna says is the first initial characteristics we saw. Those are the transcendental qualities. Okay, and what do? They are conducive to liberation. Whereas what do the demonic qualities do? Demonic qualities make for bondage. So the distinction is there's a clear dichotomy here. The first part is what do the transcendental qualities lead to? They are leading to the dharma of the soul, to liberation. Whereas what does the demonic nature does? It goes to the opposite way. It constitutes bondage for the soul, right? Let's see what's the next sloka. 16.6. O son of Pritha, in this world there are 2 kinds of created beings. One is called divine and the other demonic. I have already explained to you at length the divine qualities. Now hear from me of the demoniac. Now initially what we saw was the characteristics of the divine person, right? Now Krishna is saying that he has already explained to Arjuna at length about the divine qualities, correct? Now Krishna is giving an introduction that we are going to see how exactly the demoniac people, the people with demoniac qualities conduct themselves. 16.7.
प्रवृत्तिं च निवृत्तिं च जनाना विदुरासुरः न शौचं नापि चाचारो न सत्यं तेषु विद्यते. Those who are demonic do not know what is to be done and what is not to be done. Neither cleanliness nor proper behavior nor truth is found in them.
5 aspects Krishna mentions in this, correct? Firstly, the demoniac people do not know what is to be done. So this first thing they don't know, okay? They also don't know what is not to be done, right? So these 2 things are related. First, they don't know what is to be done, and then they don't know what is not to be done. Why? Why do they not know this? Because like you, they have not taken time out to study the Bhagavad Gita, to attend some beginners course, some principles of Bhagavad Gita, to understand the principles of Bhagavad Gita itself is a great punya in itself, right? So they don't do that. If they don't do that, obviously they will not know what is to be done, and they will not also know what is not to be done, right? Thirdly, they do not know cleanliness. They are not cleanliness here does not just mean physical. We all have a shower, we all have baths. It's just not physical bath that's referred to here. It is a spiritual cleanliness. Like chanting is the last thing on their minds. And then the other two things that Krishna says in order to round up the five is no proper behavior and no truth. There's a lot of arrogance in them. Take as for example Duryodhana. He had absolutely no humility, right? No humility, no respect, and truth, of course, is a universal principle, right? So these are the five things that the demoniac people are afflicted with. Now, as I usually say this, I usually say before we start that this is a scene from Srimad Bhagavatam, right? But this time I can't say that this is not a scene from Bhagavatam. I have to be categorical about it. It is a scene, in fact, from our everyday lives. We think that this is fun, right? This is happiness. It is neither of those. It is sinful and it brings only misery. Imagine if you are in that crowd and you try to advise them not to drink, and this is not proper, and it is supposed to lead you to demonic qualities, which will then lead to bondage. But you think these people here would listen? They're not going to listen. They are instead their reply would be, "Why are you so stuck up? You have to let go of yourself a few times at least in life. Have fun, be happy. What is there in life, right?" That would be their reply. You ask them why. They never admit. These tamasic people would never consider it wrong in the first place. Okay, they would justify it with reasons. One of the best reasons that they give is that it is good for digestion. It is good if you take it moderately. This moderation is a great evil, I tell you, because it introduces subjectivity, right? First you start off thinking, okay, I'll just have a 30 ml, and then it leads to 60 ml, and then even a 90 ml would be still seen to be an exercise in moderation, right? So moderation, the moment you step onto it, it then becomes a sliding slope. You keep increasing. Moderation just does not end. So don't believe it when they say that it is good for digestion. It's definitely not. There are better things for digestion. It's not that you have to take that to be to have a good digestive capability. In fact, it's quite the contrary to what Krishna says in the last chapter. Krishna says in the last chapter that he is the digestive fire, right? So I'm definitely sure that Krishna does not need this aid to be in the digestive fire, right? So moderation is something that we should not get onto. It's a slippery slope, as I mentioned. See, the point is this: tamasic people never agree that what the activities that they are doing is bad. But whereas you take it to a Rajasic person says, he tries to explain it away. He doesn't dispute the fact that it is bad, but he gives other reasons. He says, once in a way I drink. My girlfriend teases me because I don't drink, and so to satisfy her, I like take a 30 ml or something like that. Just to have a drink in my hand, I have to do that. See, these are principles. These are excuses which are given to the by the Rajasic people. They know heart of hearts that what they're doing is not entirely the right thing, but they are not able to curtail themselves because of other reasons. Those are the reasons. Societal pressures, basically peer pressure, so many things that they can come up with to give reasons, but they are more easy to bring them on track. It's not like they are tamasic in the nature that they don't think anything is wrong. Of course, a sattvic person is on the other extreme. He does not indulge. Even if you catch him with a drink in his hand, it's more like he'll just, I'm holding it, I'm not drinking it. Otherwise, people keep asking me, drink, drink, drink. And I just have to hold a cup at least to ward those pressures, right? So he just holds a drink. He doesn't drink out of the glass, right? See, the problem with the addicts is that they don't admit to themselves that they are addicts. Unless you admit that you have a problem, you will not be on the course to recovery. Unless the addicts confess that they have a problem with their addiction, they will not even be taken into the anonymous program. We have AAs, right? Alcoholic Anonymous and all that. Those programs don't admit a person unless the person admits that they have a problem. Only then, that's the first step. Only then is the path of recovery open to them. Okay. Now, being a demoniac does not mean that they have horns in the head. Those are things that you get in the TV, right? It's not so gross that it's immediately visible as soon as you see them. But you can identify them by their behavior, by their conduct. And therefore, it is that you have to observe them for some time in order to pass a judgment on them. And before you come to a conclusion, you'll have to, of course, observe them in the daily life, how they behave. And it is much more subtler than just showing a couple of people with horns on their head, which makes it much more easier to understand that they're demonic in nature, right? So that doesn't happen, right? So let's go to the next slide, which is 16.8.
असत्यम् अप्रतिष्ठं ते जगद् आहुरनीश्वरम् अपरस्परसम्भूतं किमन्यत् कामहैतुकम्. They say that this world is unreal and that there is no foundation and that there is no God in control. It is produced of sex desire and has no cause other than lust.
This is a direct frontal attack on the atheists. Apparently, atheists have been in existence from time immemorial, right? When I mean, back to man's creation, perhaps. See, reference here is made to the grounds on which atheists even today place their arguments. To this day, the grounds are broadly the same. What do they say? This is truly a beauty of a concept. So many years down the line, and what is said then is applicable even today. Absolutely no change. What applies then even applies today, correct? Of course, there are changes. We have ruined the Varnashrama system entirely, but nevertheless, the point is that the grounds which are being raised by the atheists then also are what they say today. So what do they say? They say this world has no God in it. First of all, that I mean, by definition, that is being an atheist, correct? So first they say is that there is no foundation, there is no God. And how did the world come into being? The world came into being because of sex desire and has no cause other than lust. Right. So what they are saying is that the world is entirely unreal. This makes it very convenient for them, right? If it is unreal, then whatever they do does not matter, and they are free to indulge their senses. Correct. We should know that there is a fine distinction in saying that the world is unreal without consequences, and saying that the world is an illusion, but then that illusion has consequences, right? So when there's no consequence, they are free to act however they want. So it is a way to give an intellectual color to satisfaction of your self desires, of your desires of the senses, correct? So therefore it is that these people proclaim they declare so boldly that there is no God, and if there's God, prove it to me. So many, I mean, that's the basic foundations of being an atheist. And let's see what happens to them. 16.9. Following such conclusions, the demoniac, who are lost to themselves and who have no intelligence, engage in unbeneficial, horrible works meant to destroy the world. This verse gives us the consequence of the acts of such atheists. What are they doing? They are into cloning, gain of function research. That is what brought about this pandemic, right? So many innocent people lost their lives because of some smarty pants scientists thought that it was okay to find out what a virus did. Such a research is clearly banned. Actually, there is an international convention which bans these sort of research. But then there is an exception to that ban. That is, the exception is that if you can continue researching if you want to know what the function of the virus is. You cannot use the virus for anything, but if you want to know what the function of the virus is, you can continue it. That's why it's called gain of function research. Now, this gain of function research is what caused the entire trouble, right? We know what happened thereafter with the virus. This is, as I mentioned, let's take another example. Let's take the example of the atom bomb. Destroyed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Cruel bombs. That's what the Japanese emperor referred to them in his surrender declaration, in his capitulation speech. We have today with us weapons of mass destruction, which ensures MAD. MAD is mutually assured destruction, right? The entire planet will end with those weapons if those weapons are employed. In fact, we came very close to it during the Cold War in the Cuban Missile Crisis. You can look it up on Google. I'll just tell you very quickly from out of memory. So the United States had machines monitoring the any launch of nuclear weapons by Soviet Union, right? So these machines started beeping wildly that nuclear weapons have been launched by the Soviet Union from Cuba. Luckily for humanity, that day, a person sat at the controls who doubted the input from the machines. His only duty was to inform his superiors if the machine started beeping, right? But luckily for us, he did not do his job that day. So he waited for further confirmation. And that amount of wait, had it been otherwise, could have really been disastrous, right? But then he realized that it was a false alarm, and there was subsequently evidence coming in that that it was indeed a false alarm. But what I'm saying is very crude narration from memory, but please read it. You'll be shocked to how close we came to total destruction. And why is that? It is because of these things here. Science by itself is not bad, but then it's how we use science, isn't it? It like fire. Fire by itself is not bad. It can help in lighting a candlestick, and it can also help in putting on an entire house out, right, by fire. So these are things that we have to deal with if we are first properly equipped to deal with. If you're not, if you are demonic in nature, you're going to deny God. No, sir, that's not the way to go about it then, right? That's why spirituality is so important. Spirituality takes you to the right, but it gives you the right perspective to put things to use in God's name. Otherwise, it doesn't. It just leads to these things. See the explosion there. It's called a mushroom cloud. Okay, anyway, so let's go to this next verse, which is more description of what the demoniac people do. 16.10. The demoniac, taking shelter of insatiable lust, pride, and false prestige, and being thus illusioned, are always sworn to unclean work, attracted by the impermanent. 16.11 and 12. They believe that to gratify the senses unto the end of life is the prime necessity of human civilization. Thus, there is no end to their anxiety. Being bound by hundreds and thousands of desires, by lust and anger, they secure money by illegal means for sense gratification. These verses are evident. I mean, they don't require any great explanation, because we know the Grimm principles, right? This is the Grimm principles, GRIM, sorry. GRIM, right? They indulge, these people, they indulge. Just think about the animals. Let's take, for example, meat eating. Which are the animals that you eat? Goat, chicken, pig, cow, all animals which do not put up a fight. Let's see you go and fight a tiger and then eat a tiger. First of all, law will put you inside. That's an entire different thing. But the point is, we take advantage of only those animals which trust us, which interest themselves to our care, right? So how cruel is that? You are betraying that trust also when you're actually slaughtering them for what you want to eat, right? They have a higher sense of conscience. That's the reason why meat eating is so frowned upon. See, vegetables have a lower, they are more subtle in nature, right? So it is that it is better. It's better of the two evils, right? And both of them are evils, make no mistake. But then this is the lesser of the evil. That's why before you eat, as I mentioned previously during the karma chapters, just offer the food to God, and all that sin is wiped out. I'm sure you'll all agree with this, that there is no end to our desires, right? When one is satisfied, there's another one which pops. 1 year before, you get the latest iPhone, and then about 6 months later, another iPhone comes up, and this has got all the beautiful features. It's got a wonderful display, which is just a marginal improvement at the end of it from the previous phone. But then we hanker after it, right? There is no end to satisfaction of desires. If one is satisfied, the other one immediately pops up. There are hundreds popping up when one is satisfied, in fact. So it is not possible for us to satisfy all your sense desires. But then we keep chasing them, right? We keep chasing the means of satisfying our desires. And what does that means? Money. We keep chasing money. So many miseries we come across while we chase money. And yet we never give up this chase of money, right? And in this chase of money, what happens? We fall in anxiety, anger, lust, pride, arrogance, and so many sins we commit in the course of gathering of this money, right? All to do what? To satisfy the senses, sense gratification. So therefore, it is that throughout Bhagavad Gita, you'll get this one literal message to control your sense desires. Until you control your sense desires, there is no hope at all. Okay. And what do demoniac people do? They are so much into sense gratification. And the last line is pertinent throughout the ages. They secure money by illegal means for sense gratification, because money by normal means would not be adequate to satisfy all your senses, right? They do satisfy senses. They will keep you alive. They will keep your soul with the body. But if you want to gratify all your senses, then you'll need lots of money. And where do you get lots of money? As they say, behind every fortune, there's a crime, right? So sense gratification to that level would require money which can only be garnered by illegal means, right? So let's proceed. 16.13 to 16.15. Oh, this is an important sloka. The demoniac person thinks So much wealth do I have today, and I will gain more according to my schemes. So much is mine now, and it will increase in future, more and more. He is my enemy, and I have killed him, and my other enemy will also be killed. I am the Lord of everything. I am the enjoyer. I am perfect, powerful, and happy. I am the richest man surrounded by aristocratic relatives. There is none so powerful and happy as I am. I shall perform sacrifices. I shall give some charity, and thus I shall rejoice. In this way, such persons are deluded by ignorance. The best laid plans of mice and men, right? That's a poetry also of mice, I think it's called. Uh, what is the other one? Man proposes, God disposes, right? Man cannot even propose. He can only serve God. Okay. So this is how a demoniac person behaves. I am the Lord of everything. I am the enjoyer. This is the problem. This is why we are here, and we are not with Krishna, because of this this feeling of wanting to be the Lord of everything, to enjoy what, while Krishna declares that he is the supreme enjoyer of all sacrifices. And therefore, as I mentioned, envy crops up. And once there is envy, Krishna has to let us go to satisfy our desires, and then come back and join him when we realize what the truth of the matter is actually is. 16.16. Thus perplexed by various anxieties and bound by a network of illusion, one becomes too strongly attached to sense enjoyment and falls down to hell. So again, what is the problem here? Sense enjoyment. And what happens when you become too strongly attached to it? You fall down to hell. So what is the shortcut to hell? Sense enjoyment. Straightforward answer, right? So again, the principle is curtail your senses. Don't give in to your sense requirements. Control your mind. All these are repeated so many times in the Bhagavad Gita. Why are they repeated so many times? They are repeated so many times for the simple reason that they are important. That's why emphasized by repetition, by repetition. That's what is the principle which is followed in Bhagavad Gita. 16.18. Bewildered by false ego, strength, pride, lust, and anger, the demon becomes envious of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is situated in his own body and in the body of others, and blasphemes against the real religion. Now, this is where the explanation comes from of why we are in this world. The demon becomes envious of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, envy of the Lord, false ego, strength, pride, lust, and anger that we have all seen. They are all like ornaments of a demon, right? Here we see Shishupal's vanquishment when he blasphemes against Krishna 100 times. Krishna keeps quiet for 100 times because he promises his mother, Shishupal's mother, that he will not hurt him immediately, and he will be patient till the 100th insult. So this is what happens. This is a scene from that from Mahabharata. 16.19. Those who are envious and mischievous, who are the lowest among men, are cast by me into the ocean of material existence, into various demonic species of life. Three kinds are cast away. What are those three kinds? Envious, mischievous, and the lowest among men. So Krishna categorizes them into three modes. One who is filled with envy, one who is mischievous, and one who is lowest among men. And where are they cast away? They are cast away into the ocean of material existence. Now, what is this ocean of material existence? It is this place, this earth, Bhuloka. Bhuloka is the ocean of material existence because it is here where all the materials are available. Right? You seek pleasure, you get it everywhere. All you need is means to reach that. That is all, and you get it. And the more you indulge in that sort of an approach, what happens? You are deluded. And once you are deluded, what happens? As the previous verse mentioned, we go straight to hell. 16.20. Attaining repeated births amongst the peace. 16.20. Attaining repeated birth amongst the species of demonic life, such persons can never approach me. Gradually, they sink down to the most abominable type of existence. This is the highest curse that a person can have. No liberation. That is the highest curse that can befall a person. The curse of never being able to reach Godhead. The purpose of the soul is left high and dry, right? What would you do? Birth and rebirth, and you just keep on going across this Punarapi Janaram, Puranapi Mananam, right? And there is no hope unless you alter your ways, until you change your ways, you're going to sink down to the most abominable type of existence. We have how many worlds below us? 7 worlds, ending with Patal Lok, right? So even there, if you don't change your ways, then there is absolutely no hope. See, we must understand that the highest dharma of the soul, the dharma of the soul is to reach Godhead. And God is saying here that if you don't amend your ways, if you don't come on to the uh, to the divine nature, which is mentioned here, those 26 qualities, he is not going to do anything about it. You will rot where you are, right? So therefore it is that we have to adapt to what Krishna is saying, to what those 26 qualities are. We have to follow those qualities. It's not very difficult. It just requires a change in lifestyle entirely. So the point is we have to amend our ways. Otherwise, the consequences mentioned here, they will sink down to the most abominable type of existence. 16.21.
त्रिविधं नरकस्येदं द्वारं नाशनम् आत्मनः कामक्रोधस्तथा लोभास्तस्माद् एतत्त्रयं त्यजेत्. There are 3 gates leading to this hell: lust, anger, and greed. Every sane man should give these up, for they lead to the degradation of the soul.
Important sloka again. The 3 gates that lead to hell. What are they? Lust, greed, and anger. And where do they lead to? Straight to the degradation of the soul. Krishna says here, they lead to the degradation of the soul. So what must we have? Let's see what we must have. These are 3 things that we must avoid having: greed, lust, and anger. Okay, now let us see what the next slide says that we have to have. 16.22. The man who has escaped these 3 gates of hell. What are those 3 gates? Lust, greed, and anger, correct? The man who has escaped these 3 gates of hell, O son of Kunti, performs acts conducive to self-realization and thus gradually attains the supreme destination. And what are those acts that you're supposed to do? You should accept a spiritual master. See, the spiritual master here is showing the disciple the way to God. So once you accept the spiritual master, what do? You have to study the scriptures, the Vedas, and then you have to lead an austere life, control your senses, learn more spiritual knowledge, and eventually you reach Godhead. What is the first of the 20 characteristics, 20 features that we saw of to get spiritual knowledge? The first one is humility, correct? Very important characteristic. Humility is the perhaps that's why it's actually listed as the first quality. Which chapter is that? Chapter 13. Chapter 13, we saw the 20 modes with 20 characteristics which help in a person to get spiritual knowledge. And the first one there is humility. So unless you're humble, none of these will follow. You will not be in a position to accept a spiritual master. There's absolutely no way. Without that, you're going to study the Vedas. Austerity is not possible. Sense control, nothing else will follow. The first step is to be humble. That's why in Bhagavad Gita also, the first point which is stated in chapter 13 is humility. Okay. 16.23.
यः शास्त्र विधिम् उत्सृज्य वर्तते कामकारतः न स सिद्धिम् अवाप्नोति न सुखं न परां गतिम्. But he who discards scriptural injunctions and acts according to his own whims attains neither perfection nor happiness nor the supreme destination.
Simple, straightforward verse. Krishna says, follow the Shastras or the spiritual injunctions. Don't act as per what your mind says. See, who discards spiritual injunctions and then acts according to his own whims. So 2 things that Krishna says. He says, follow the scriptures. 2, don't act whatever your mind thinks that this is the way. Why is Krishna saying this? Krishna is saying this because we must understand that our mind is limited. We think that merely by applying mind over matter, we can surmount everything. We have come a long way in scientific discoveries, and that has been made possible by applying the mind over matter. But then we lose sight of this basic idea that science is only an implement. It's an instrument. It's an instrument to further the process of leading to Godhead. Like let's take this present scenario we are in. I have a computer in front of me, right? This is possible entirely by science. But then we are using this in order to spread the message of God. Now that is the proper implementation of science. So science by itself, as I keep repeating, is not bad. The problem is how you utilize science. That is where lies the conundrum. If you utilize science in a way that it helps you to lead to Godhead, to achieve your supreme purpose of life, then there is no problem with science. Other than that, if you are going to follow your own whims according to, and think that mind is the highest, then we'll have problems there. We'll have miseries to face. The problem is we don't come to seem to realize that that the mind is limited. We think the mind is unlimited. You know that there's a theory that the brain is so complicated that it cannot study itself, or it cannot fully understand itself, because if it is completely able to study itself, there should be a higher intelligence which should be able to study it, because in itself it is limited, right? So it is there's this failure of understanding that that there's an illusion operating about us. We fail to realize that there is these three material modes of nature by which we act, and then we give mind an unnecessary aura. It's an instrument. That is all it is. We should be aware that we are a victim of illusions, that the mind has to be taught to break free from bindings. We saw the stories of Ajamila, right? Ajamila, and also the story of sage Bharata. You remember the deer, and then Bharata has the prostitute. Okay, those all stages, those all stories. What was the problem? The problem was caused by their minds. It's because they failed to control their minds. They acted on the whims of their own minds, correct? And what happened? Eventually, they did attain perfection, but then that happened only when they brought their minds back into their own control. But if you don't bring the mind to your control, what happens? You neither attain perfection, nor happiness, nor the supreme destination. So what is the point? There is no point, right? If you're not able to get to these three, what is the point of the mind? There is no point at all. We got to realize that that is the point of our entire existence. Let's proceed to the next verse, 16.24. This is the completion verse.
तस्मात् शास्त्रं प्रमाणं ते कार्यकार्यव्यवस्थितौ ज्ञात्वा शास्त्रविधानोक्तं कर्म कर्तुम् इहारसि. One should understand what is duty and what is not duty by the regulations of the scriptures. Knowing such rules and regulations, one should act so that he may gradually be elevated.
We saw the previous slide, right? Let me just take you to the slide. What is the first step? The first step is acceptance of a spiritual master. That is exactly what Krishna is saying here. Unless you, let me just go back to that, sorry. Unless you accept a spiritual master, as I said, you will not get any of these here. You may try and read the Bhagavad Gita on your own, okay? But then please try it. Without guidance, it is very difficult to understand what is actually being taught. But for Srila Prabhupada's book, I really doubt if reading Bhagavad Gita on its own would even be a person can understand on his own without the guidance of a spiritual master. Now, thankfully for us, we have Srila Prabhupada's book, because his purports truly explain the meaning of each verse in the Bhagavad Gita. So it makes it a little easier, but because that if you're just going to read the Sanskrit text or the English translation, before Srila Prabhupada's book, there have been so many English translations by Britishers, by Europeans, in fact. And going through it, it is not easy to understand what is Brahman, what is Kshetra, what is Kshetrajna, unless it is simplified. It is very difficult to understand. And who is the person who is going to simplify it for you? Not any Tom, Dick, and Harry, right? It has to be simplified by a bona fide spiritual guru. And unless you surrender to that guru and seek his guidance in understanding the scriptures, it is not going to help by merely reading it on our own, right? And that is what Krishna is saying here. Act always according to the evidence of the Shastras. The problem is, what is the evidence of the Shastras, and how do we know that that this is the evidence of the Shastras? And that is where the purpose of a guru comes into picture, right? Without a guru, as I was mentioning, you cannot understand anything of the spiritual texts. Even Krishna had a guru, isn't it? Even Krishna had a guru, Sandipani Muni, correct? Well, why did Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that he is the Vedas, he is the Om, he is all of knowledge, correct? And yet he had a guru. Why did he have to have a guru? Because he's giving us a reason, an example to set. You remember Krishna says, people follow great persons, and therefore great persons have to conduct themselves very righteously. And therefore this comes in the initial chapters, in the Karma Kanda and in the Karma Yoga chapters, right? In the second chapter itself, if I'm not wrong. So Krishna is setting an example of himself here. Why did he have to have Sandipani Muni as his guru? He says, even though I am the Vedas, even though I am the origin of everything, I have a guru. Similarly, you must also have a guru. He is setting an example for us that you should also have a guru, the guru who would teach you the Shastras and who would take you through the right path in order to reach the final destination. And with that, we conclude today's chapter, short chapter. And let's see what all, quickly revise what all we have seen. First, we started off with, let's just take it on here itself. Let's take it from here. Okay. So this is what the first slide we saw. The 26 characteristics of a godly person endowed with divine nature. We went through very quickly the characteristics, and the universal ones we did not touch upon so much. And then we saw Krishna giving an introduction to the demonic, to the qualities of a demonic person: arrogance, pride, anger, conceit, harshness, and ignorance. Right? These are all qualities which belong to the person with a demonic nature. And then we saw about what these actions lead to. The transcendental qualities lead to liberation. The demonic qualities lead to bondage. And then Krishna certifies Arjuna here that he is born with divine qualities. Right? And then we saw what happens here. Again, Krishna is giving an introduction before he explains in detail about the demoniac qualities of a demonic person. And the first thing he says is that they don't know what is to be done, and they know what is not to be done, and they do not know what is to be done. They have neither cleanliness, nor proper behavior, nor truth. Now, we touched upon all these aspects. And then we ventured to the qualities of an atheist. Who is an atheist? What is his philosophy? And I mentioned that this is the same philosophy that they're applying even today, right? That the world has been produced out of sex desire, and there's nothing except lust in this world, and that enables them to do whatever they like in this world without the fear of consequences. And then what is the activities of such atheistic people? They go and do all things which they should not do. They apply their mind to make the world worse and unsafe than it previously was. We saw about MAD, mutually assured destruction. Correct? That's an interesting acronym because it does actually indicate the atheist frame of mind, MAD. And then we saw what the demoniac peoples, how they conduct themselves. They take shelter of insatiable lust, pride, false prestige, and while being so illusioned, they are sworn to unclean work, attracted by the impermanent, which is where the fourfold principles come in, the grim principles, as I call it, right? So please follow these grim principles. This will keep you in good stead. And then we saw in 16.11 and 12 that they satisfy the senses in spite of the edict in the Bhagavad Gita not to satisfy, not to encourage our sense gratification too much. And then we saw about the entire thinking of a demoniac person, right? About how much he will gain wealth, about how his enemies will be vanquished, about how he is the lord of everything and the enjoyer, and how perfect and powerful he is, and how in spite of doing sacrifices he is still doomed and he's deluded by ignorance, right? And then we saw about the consequences of being so. What is the consequence? One becomes strongly attached to sense enjoyment, and where does that lead you to? It leads you down to hell. And then what happens is the envy, the envy sloka, right? We saw this is where the envy comes from, the explanation of envy. False ego, strength, pride, lust, and anger. The person is bewildered and being envious of the Lord, he is blaspheming against the real religion, right? And what happens to such persons? They are the worst cookers ever. They are cast away into an ocean of material existence, into various demonic species of life, with no liberation, with no hope of liberation unless they amend their ways. Attaining repeated birth amongst the species of demonic life, such person can never approach me. You can never reach God if you are indulging in these things. Unless you change your ways, this door is totally shut. You cannot approach God. And what happens when you can't approach God? You sink down to the most abominable type of existence, Patal Lok. And then eventually we concluded with what are the three gates leading to hell, which is lust, anger, and greed, and that we should give up these three things. And if you give up those three things, and on the other hand, accept these principles here, that is acceptance of a spiritual master, study of the Vedas, austerity, self-control, spiritual knowledge, all this will gradually lead you to attaining the supreme destination. And we concluded with two verses, that the person who acts according to his own whims will not get perfection, will not get happiness, nor will he get the supreme destination. And the concluding verse is this, that you should have a proper guru, and who will be able to explain to you what is duty and what is not duty according to the scriptures. Knowing, it is only by knowing through such rules and regulations that you can act or conduct yourself in a manner in which you may gradually be elevated and finally reach the Godhead. And with that, we conclude this session. So 5-minute quick recap. I hope you'll all remember. I'm sure you'll all remember what has been taught in class today. And this is the concluding style, which we just quickly revised. So I'm not going to go into this again. So let's conclude with our Guru Pranam. Om Ajnanati Mirandasya Jnananjana Salakya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Shri Vaishnava Pranam. Pancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhayeva Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Hare Krishna Kishore Prabhuji.
Yeah, Hare Krishna Mataji. Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna devotees. Today we are going to present you with Bala Krishna Ashtakam.
Very nice.
Yeah, this is again given to us by Adi Shankaracharya. So a brief introduction about this Ashtakam. Krishna, you are the blue one who protects us, and who protected the silent Kuchela with compassion, and you are having a fascinating blue color. Oh, stealer of the hearts, Gopala Bala, I depend on you. He has a gentle smile, he supports all. I bow down to you. You eliminate all evil beings. And you are adorned with a charming diamond necklace, spreading the glory, resides in Dwaraka. And you are having the tingling bells makes us fearless and rest on a serpent. He is having a light of earrings that encircle his face and cheeks. And all the wise men rise up in front of his white lotus-like radiance. He is supported in forests, and his presence in grove, that is in Vrindavan, that gave us unblemished happiness. He has lotus eye, and the lotus eyes are beautiful. And he has tranquilizing flute music. And every stanza we go with Balakrishna Ashraya. So I depend on you. That's what the entire stanza says. Hare Krishna. Balakrishna Mashraye. Balakrishna Mashraye. Leelaya Kuchela Mauni Palitam Krupakaram Neela Neela Mindra Neela Neela Kanti Mohanam Bala Neela Charu Komalalakam Bala Neela Charu Komalalakam Vilasa Gopala Bala Jara Chora Bala Krishna Mashraye Gopala Bala Jara Chora Bala Krishna Mashraye Balakrishna Mashraye, Balakrishna Mashraye. Indukunda Mandahasa Mindiradharadharam Nanda Gopanandanam Sanandanadi Vanditam Nanda Godhanam Surari Mardhanam Nanda Godhanam Surari Mardhanam Samasta Gopala Bala Jara Chora Bala Krishna Mashraye Gopala Bala Jara Chora Bala Krishna Mashraye Balakrishna Mashraye Balakrishna Mashraye वारिहारहीरचारु कीर्तितं विराजितं द्वारका विहारमम्बुजारि सूर्यलोचनं भूरिमेरुधीरमादिकारणं भूरिमेरुधीरमादिकारणं सुसेव्य गोपाल बालजार चोर बालकृष्णमाश्रये गोपाल बालजार चोर बालकृष्णमाश्रये 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 शेषभोगशायिनीं विशेषभूषणोज्ज्वलं घोषमान किङ्किणी विभीषणादिपोषणं शोषणाकृताम्बुधिं विभीषणार्चितं शोषणाकृताम्बुधिं विभीषणार्चितं पदं गोपाल बालचार चोर बालकृष्णमाश्रये गोपाल बालचार चोर बालकृष्णमाश्रये 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 पंडिताखिलस्तुतं पुण्डरीकभास्वरं कुण्डलप्रभासमानतुण्डगण्डमण्डलं पुण्डरीकसन्नुतं जगन्नुतं पुण्डरीकसन्नुतं जगन्नुतं मनोज्ञकं गोपाल बालचार चोर बालकृष्णमाश्रये गोपाल बालचार चोर बालकृष्णमाश्रये 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 आञ्जनेय मुख्य पालवानरेन्द्र कृन्तनं कुञ्जरारि भञ्जनं निरञ्जनं शुभाकरं मञ्जुकुञ्ज पत्र नेत्र राजितं मञ्जुकुञ्ज पत्र नेत्र राजितं विराजितं गोपाल बालचार चोर बालकृष्णमाश्रये गोपाल बालचार चोर बालकृष्णमाश्रये 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 रामणीय यज्ञधाम भामिनी वरप्रदं मनोहरं गुणाभिराम उन्नतोन्नतं गुरुं सामगान वेणुनादलोला सामगान वेणुनादलोल मज्जितास्तकं गोपाल बालचार चोर बालकृष्णमाश्रये गोपाल बालरार चोर बालकृष्णमाश्रये 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 रंगधिंदिरांग मंगलांग शौर्य भासद संगदासुरोत्तमांग भंग कप्रदायकं तुंग वैरवाभिराम मंगलामृतं तुंग वैरवाभिराम मंगलामृतं सदा गोपाल बालचार चोर बालकृष्णमाश्रये गोपाल बालचार चोर बालकृष्णमाश्रये 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 बालकृष्ण पुण्य नाम लालितं शुभाष्टकं ये पठन्ति सात्विकोत्तमा सदा मुदाच्युतं राजमान पुत्र संपदादि शोभनानित साधयन्ति विष्णुलोकमव्ययं न राचते बालकृष्णमाश्रये बालकृष्णमाश्रये हरे कृष्ण
Very nice, Prabhuji. Very nice. Thank you so much. It was really divine. Very nice. Very, very, very melodious. Thank you. Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you so much. Prabhuji, shall we continue with the question?
Before questions, Mataji, I just wanted to address the devotees on an important matter. Shraddhavan Seva, right? From the beginning of the class, I have been requesting all of you to chant at least one round. I'm hoping most of you have been doing that, and you must continue doing it also after the end of this this session. We have another couple of days to go, isn't it? 2 more chapters, 17 and 18 to go through. By that, please make up your mind that you're going to chant at least once. And we have a program called Shraddhavan Seva. And in that, we will give you a certificate that you have enrolled for that course. All you have to do is chant one round. 10 days, 10 minutes for a day, if to chant one round. It has many levels. There is Shraddhavan, there are 4 other levels included, but start off with Shraddhavan. It keeps you, see, unless there's a compulsion, we will not be focused on what we are doing, unless there's a compulsion, unless we give our word that we will chant one round for Krishna. We tend to forget. There are so many things happening in our day-to-day lives, right? So unless, as I was mentioning, there's some kind of compulsion, we will not do it, and that's where Shraddhavan Seva comes into being. All you have to do is undertake that you will chant one round, and there will be a specific graduation ceremony for that, in which your name will be read out before the Lord, and and you take up this oath that you will chant that one round. Neha Mataji,
Yes,
please post the links in the group today for Shraddhavan Seva,
sure.
and the higher ones also. We have about 4 of them, right?
Prabhuji.
Leading till Guru Pranam. Right?
Yes.
So please share all those links with the devotees today in both the groups.
Okay, Prabhuji.
Okay, please go through those links. It will give you a detailed, not detailed, a short explanation of what I just said. But then I have not explained the other programs which are available, which will also be included in the links which are shared today by Neha Mataji. So please go through the links. If there's any doubt, please let me know tomorrow, and I'll be more than happy to resolve it. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. So we begin with the questions in the chat box.
Yes, Mataji. There are no
First
raised
question.
hands. Okay.
Yeah. First question is by Aruni Mataji.
Mhm.
How should I offer food to Krishna before having any meal when that meal itself contains garlic and onion?
How can I offer any? You don't have to offer meals. Krishna say not saying that. Krishna says 4 things, right? Patram, phalam, pushpam, toyam. You offer water, Krishna is happy. He's happy with it. Okay, if you're not able to offer him anything as prasad, as naivedyam, you can always offer water. Water is good enough, isn't it? He says it is good enough. So, and along with water, we always buy fruits. We always have fruits at our house. Just wash a fruit and keep an apple next to him, or keep an orange next to him. He's satisfied. He doesn't require anything. It's only an expression of our love. See, Krishna does not, he is the master of the universe, right? So you just have to keep a fruit and water, that is more than adequate. Problem is, if you have tamasic items in your food, then of course you cannot offer it to the Lord. And even if you find it difficult, if you're outside, I've explained this before also in class. If you're outside and you don't have control over the food that you can have, and if it has, and you suspect if it has onion or garlic, well, Krishna would understand. He's generosity himself, right? So once or twice it's okay, but don't make it a regular practice of it. Offer
Next.
water and fruit is sufficient.
Yeah, Prabhuji, there's a statement by K. Jyotirmaya Mataji. She is saying, I'm chanting 4 times a day now.
Oh, that's very nice, Mataji. Very nice, very nice. Then you can actually go to the next level. The one which is above Ashriya. I think it is Ashriya. After Shraddhavan, I think it's Ashriya. Neha Mataji, please correct if I'm wrong.
Sevaka, Prabhuji, it was.
Sorry.
Sevaka.
Sevaka. Okay. So, okay, Mataji. So please go through those links, and I'm sure you'll get more information. Any doubt, please let me know. And it's very nice. I'm very happy that you're chanting 4 times a day.
Yes, Prabhuji. No more questions yet. But there's a request by Galaxy Note 10 Plus. Please send the link of 1 round of chanting of the Mahamantra.
Okay, we can share the japa which has been played by Srila Prabhupada, which we played before class, right?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Yeah. So please share that also, Mataji.
Okay, Prabhuji.
Sripad Prabhuji has raised his hand.
Yes, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. You can unmute yourself.
Oh, he still has the same problem, is it? Prabhuji, we are not able to hear you. You're not audible. Mataji, were there a lot of dropouts today in connection, in the internet connection?
No, Prabhuji. It was at his end. Sripad Prabhuji's end.
Okay. Because I just saw his comment that he's mentioned 8 times it was gone. We are waiting for Sripad Prabhuji to drop his comment. Let's see. Jyotirmayi Mataji has dropped it. While doing japa after completion of a round, why should japa mala be reversed? It should be reversed, Mataji, because you're not supposed to cross the head bead, right? The Krishna bead, as it's called. Krishna is there to witness your japa, right? So you're not supposed to cross him. Therefore, it is that you have to reverse the bead and chant again. Geeta Mataji has a question. I made sambar rice without onion and added ghee and as Naivedyam to Krishna today. It is Dwadasi here and today. Very nice, Mataji. Wonderful, wonderful. Sambar rice is good without onion and garlic. Very nice. Krishna would have relished. I'm sure you would have felt the enhancement in the taste after you offer it to Krishna and then you eat, right? Then you partake the food. Somehow I don't know. I don't know if it's mentally an impression or something, but for me, I can feel that there's definitely a change in taste. It definitely is much more delicious than you have
Yeah.
without.
Yes, Prabhuji,
Yes.
definitely it is.
Manoj, quite a few questions in the chat.
Yes,
Can you
Prabhuji,
take
I
that?
got it now. It's a question by Vedanti Mataji. Can we use japa mala during menstruation or should we chant by counting on fingers?
There's absolutely no problem, Mataji. You can use you can use the mala. No problem. You just have to keep it respectfully. That is all. Yeah, especially Tulsi mala. Tulsi mala is where all the regulation comes in because Tulsi is very dear to Krishna, right? So with Tulsi mala, we have to give it an extra layer of importance, like extra layer of devotion, and extra layer of protection. So you can't just leave your japa mala anywhere. That's why you if you're using a Tulsi mala, you have to keep it in a bead bag. Otherwise, it's not auspicious. You have to treat Tulsi with that amount of respect because she is very dear devotee to Krishna. Okay. Otherwise, if it's a normal bead, normal 108 bead mala, it's okay. There are advantages in having a bead bag because you will not automatically keep it on the floor or just put it on the table just like that, right? You'll hang it up somewhere. That's always better to have it in a bead bag.
Next
Wow,
question is
wow, Geeta Mataji, 64 rounds on Ekadesi. Wow, that is phenomenal, phenomenal. 64 rounds is
Wow, Hari Bol.
really unbelievable. Hari Bol, as Neha Mataji pointed out. Very nice, very nice. Wonderful, Mataji. 64 rounds is no joke. How many hours did you spend on it? How much time did it take you, Mataji? I've never even gotten close to 64.
Should I read the next question, Prabhuji?
Yes, please. In the meantime.
Why Krishna refers Arjuna with different names, son of Kunti, son of Pritha, and so on? Arjuna reciprocates the same way. What is the reason?
Probably that's how they address themselves at that period of time. See, these are all social norms, right? They change over a period of time. Here, addressing us with our own name is difficult. We have what is called pet names, correct? So even the name which is given to us is not addressed. We are not addressed by that name. Probably that was the way the society was at that time. We don't know. But then if you read the scriptures, this is a prevalent feature. You will find this in almost all the scriptures. If a person can be known by different ways, they are referred to as different ways. Another thing which comes to my mind is those names keep repeating, right? We have the same name, so therefore it also serves as a mode of identification. When Krishna says son of Kunti, it means only Arjuna, right? When he's it serves as an index of identification. He says Pritha, Kunti, son, and so on, right? So it serves also as a mode of identification. He says, oh, one of strong arms. So all that serves as a mode of identification also. Made 16 rounds yesterday. Subarav, wonderful Subarav, very nice, wonderful. As I mentioned earlier also in this, when we are dealing with the first 6 chapters, this batch is really a very enlightened batch. I'm so happy to be involved, to be telling you the message of Gita. Very nice. It's a real privilege to me, actually. Any further questions? Sripad Prabhuji is still typing? His camera is off.
No, there's a question by Shlok Shetty Mataji. Should I continue?
Yes, Mataji.
What is the difference between the mantra Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya and Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare?
If you take up Srimad Bhagavatam, the first volume, The first volume, the first page, it starts with Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay, so I'm not entirely sure of the history. I think it's a mantra which was given by a guru to a disciple. Neha Mataji, are you aware? You probably know this. If you're aware, please feel free to chip in. And Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, I've mentioned many times, so I'm sure you know the history of that. But I will let you know. I'll find out and I'll let you know. Shlok Shetty tomorrow, Prabhuji, about the difference between these two, because
As far
offhand
as-
I don't know. I'm
As
not
far as
entirely-
I know, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, we when we start anything, we do that.
Okay. Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. Because even the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, we start off with Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, right? And then
Yes.
we go on to the Guru Pranam, and then only we start chanting. Okay. So okay, that's a point I'll take into consideration. Okay, I'll refer the answer tomorrow, probably. I'm not entirely sure, so I'm not in a position to answer immediately.
Next is by Geeta Mataji. I chanted morning, after. She's telling that how much.
Okay. Yeah, we asked her.
I
No?
chanted morning, afternoon, evening, and night 4 times, 16 rounds each time. One time I took 2 hours.
So 8
For
hours, no?
16 rounds, she took 2 hours.
Yeah. So
For
8 hours.
64, she might take, yeah.
8 hours. That is how Namanishta Prabhuji says you must divide a day. You split it into 3 eighths. First 8 is for serving the Lord. The next 8 is for doing your material duties. The next 8 after that is for your body, is for rest and recuperation. Excellent, Mataji. Wonderful.
Acknowledgements, Prabhu. Nidhi Mataji says, Prabhuji, you explained so wonderfully.
Thank you. Hare
We
Krishna,
inspired
Hare
to chant.
Bol. Thank you.
And Shlok Shetty also said, thank you so much, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. There is a direct message to me from Hrithik Prabhuji. Is it fine to listen to Maha Mantra on earphone while chanting? I'm more focused that way. Yes, you can hear to the Maha Mantra, no problem. But if you have it on a earphone, the problem is you may not be able to hear yourself. The point is this: what you chant, you have to engage as many senses as you can while you're chanting, right? That's why we recommend that you chant audibly. So when you have your headphones, if it is not that one which seals the entire ear, and you're able to hear what you're saying, like for example, this headphone, this earphone that I'm using, I'm able to hear myself speak, right? But I can also hear people who are talking to me from the other end. So these sort of earphones, if you use, there's no problem. But then if you're not able to hear yourself, that is not entirely proper. So make sure that you're able to hear yourself also when you're chanting. No further questions? I think we can conclude, Mataji.
Not
We're
yet.
concluding very early today, 7:20.
Yeah, chapter
Okay.
is also very short.
It's a short chapter. It's a short chapter. 18th chapter is a long one. 17th
Yeah.
is also short.
2
17th is
and
also
18.
2 and 18. Yes, correct. The last one and the second one, correct. Tomorrow is also a short chapter, if I recall right. I'll just give you a premiere of what tomorrow is, a trailer as it were. Tomorrow is, yes, Shraddhatraya Vibhaga Yoga, divisions of faith. This is also a short one. This is also short. We have how many? About 28 slokas tomorrow. Tomorrow we will get to know what are the penances, the austerities, the food, which are considered to be in the 3 material modes of nature. So that is what we are going to deal with tomorrow. Okay, so I think we can conclude. I am 64 for Ekadasi. I had some milk and banana at 6 p.m. Wonderful, Mataji. Hare Krishna. Hare Bol.
To address all of you, Prabhuji observes Nirjala Ekadashi. Says
yes.
a very big thing.
Hare Krishna. I just broke my fast. By the way, in Delhi, at least you have to break the fast by 10:05. So please be aware of the time by which you have to break your fast today. And please have, if you're refrained from having grains, please break your fast after offering it to Krishna by something like grains with roti or rice. That should be adequate. Okay, Hare Krishna. Let's conclude the session.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank
Hare
you
Krishna.
so much.
How do we conclude? We say Bhagavad Gita ki
Jai.
Srila Prabhupada ki
Jai.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. So nice of all of you to join us. Hare Krishna. Thank you. Let's meet tomorrow. Hare
Thank you so
Krishna.
much.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. I'm ending the session now.